Episode 192 of the Interpretation Station is Call to Order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing? I've got a second edition of the new format at the Interpretation Station called New Shit I Learnt Last Week. I've gone for a bit of a different look for today's episode, right? You might have noticed. So it's funny, I was about to start filming and I was wearing my t-shirt and I was just looking through the back catalogue and it occurred to me, Jesus, I keep wearing the same 2 or 3 t-shirts every time I film Interpretation Station episodes. And I thought, Jesus, people are going to start thinking that I only have 2 or 3 t-shirts. A bit like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He always appears in the same 2 or 3 t-shirts. Anyway, I thought, oh, Jesus, I need to wear something different. So I got my shirt that I wore to work today, and I was looking at myself in the little webcam, and I thought, geez, my chest's open. I need to put something there. I need to put some bit of bling. So I'm trying to cultivate the look, of the British gangsters, right? When they go into retirement, they go and just live the rest of their lives off their criminal gains in the Algarve or in Cyprus, probably the Turkish part of Cyprus. So I don't quite have the chest hair. I think you really, to really carry it off, you need a proper rug full of chest hair. But maybe I'll work on it. Maybe I'll work on it anyway. But anyway, I'm going to go for the bling look today, all right? Okay, so, of course, what you're all dying to know, though, is what new I've learnt this week, or to be more accurate, in the last 2 or 3 weeks since I last made the episode. Okay, so, we've got a few things for you here, from French, Russian, Spanish, and also generally, okay? So I'm going to actually start off with a general word that I'm trying to integrate. Pretty obvious word on the face of it, but one that I don't think I've ever used before, and it actually works very well in many situations as a sort of less blatant way of saying a lie, okay? So the word I'm talking about is just the word falsehood, okay? Maybe a bit of a euphemism, but I can't remember what meeting it was. It's happened to me 2 or 3 times, and I've just ended up saying such and such a delegation, what they've been saying, these are just lies. And they haven't actually used the word lie, but they've used sort of just a euphemism, just not to quite directly say that it's a lie, and I've said lie. But I like falsehood, right? A falsehood. It's a slightly more diplomatic way of saying a lie. It's still pretty aggressive, but just again, if you want to just get that little diplomatic connotation, maybe falsehood is a good alternative to a flat-out lie. Moving on. So, first of all, in Russian, okay, so Russism. I've been doing a lot of Human Rights Council material, and because that's going on at the moment. It's been going on this is the 4th week. There's 1 more week left. There was a meeting on the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Sri Lanka. Okay, that's a mandate that was established 2 or 3 years ago. The Sri Lankans aren't very happy about it, obviously. But the Russians, so they tend to be quite supportive of the Sri Lankan position. They're generally anti what you might call country-specific mandates. They talk about those things all the time at the Human Rights Council. And the Russians are very against mandates being established or adopted which don't have the consent of the country concerned. That's a very big deal you'll find in the Human Rights Council, okay? They're called country-specific resolutions, so creation of mandates without the consent of the country concerned. And what the Russians said was, I think, more or less, считаем контрпродуктивной практику искусственного разжигания ажиотажа вокруг положения с правами человека в Шри-Ланке. Okay? So the words that really interest me here are разжигание ажиотажа. Okay, so what's maybe the best way of rendering that? I think I went for just dramatizing. Okay, in one word, just dramatizing the situation. You could perhaps also say fanning the flames over the human rights situation. I mean, generally, so with agiotage, so if you just in its own right, that word is like a frenzy, a fuss, a commotion. So razzigat ajotage, as I say, it's like to dramatize, to making such a fuss. Other words given here on a ballyhoo, causing such a commotion. Overhyping. Okay, so you got a string of alternatives there for that expression. And if you're doing that expression, it's also interesting that считаем контрпродуктивным. Under those circumstances, I would probably drop считаем and just say it's counterproductive, or what's counterproductive is dramatizing the human rights situation in Sri Lanka. What's counterproductive is stirring up a commotion over the human rights situation in Sri Lanka. So you got a few ideas there. Okay, now the next, again, same subject matter. Okay, Sri Lanka again. This was still the special rapporteur, the Venezuelans, who were obviously going to have a similar position generally to the Russians. And in their statement, they said, es lamentable que no se valoran en su justa dimensión los grandes avances de Sri Lanka. Okay? What interests me here is the word order. It's tricky, okay? It's regrettable, es lamentable. Que no se valoran en su justa dimensión. All these words, and we don't know what we're desperate to know what the subject is. So how can we turn this clause, this package of words, no se valoran en su justa dimensión los grandes avances de Sri Lanka? Now, again, you could perhaps wait for it. You could say it's regrettable that the major progress made by Sri Lanka isn't properly valued. Okay, but again, this is like to be delivered very fast in these situations. You know, when the countries have a chance to comment, they're given 1.5 minutes. Okay, and they try and pack in as much as they can into those 1.5 minutes. So perhaps we could say, so we want to maybe turn that no se valoran into a noun. Perhaps we could say it's regrettable that insufficient value is given to the major progress made by Sri Lanka, or insufficient credit is given for the progress made in Sri Lanka. So we're basically turning in su justa dimensión into insufficient, the idea of not enough. I think it's too much to try and render all of that by saying that what's not valued in its true what is not valued in its true dimension is the great progress made by Sri Lanka. That's a lot of words, okay? So I think you just need to just slightly paraphrase it. So we'll just turn in su justa dimensión into insufficient, okay? So the insufficient credit is given to the major progress made by Sri Lanka. Staying with the Spanish, I think it may have been the same statement, okay? This expression, a su convenio, I had a good idea here for a su convenio, and I think on this occasion they were talking about how the Western countries, they talk about the imposition of unilateral coercive measures. Medidas coercitivas unilaterales, again, that's a big bugbear of certainly the Venezuelans, the Russians. They're very much against the imposition of unilateral coercive measures, which effectively are sanctions. And they talk about how the Western countries impose. Let me just blink and be better seen. Sorry. That's better. Okay. Insufficient. That they impose, that they introduce these sanctions a su convenio. So again, maybe usually I might say whenever they please. Okay, whenever they please. But another idea that came to me that's very sort of ironic, I guess, in English, and I quite like the register. You know, whenever it takes their fancy. I think that's very, derogatory, and I think that hits the right note as well. So we can just say whenever it pleases them, but also whenever it takes their fancy. Whenever it takes their fancy, they just go and introduce sanctions, UCMs against a country. Again, staying with Spanish, one of the delegations said. It was again in the same debate. This was one of the other Latino delegations, but who's more supportive, perhaps, of the line of the West. I think it may have been Ecuador, may have been. Okay, and they said that the delegate said, "Resueño con fuerza lo expresado por el relator." Okay, resueño con fuerza. Okay, so I was thinking, what's the best? I had a chance to prepare it. What's a good way of expressing that? The sueño con fuerza in particular. What resonates? I think in English that works pretty well, right? I think the full sentence, and then I went, what resonates is what the rapporteur said about lo expresado por el relator. Okay, you're using the what a couple of times, but it's not the end of the world. That way, but you get the resonate. What resonates is what the rapporteur said about. So I think that lo expresado por, you need to turn it into a verb, okay? Then staying in the Human Rights Council, but this was a different debate. This was on a debate, or it was the rapporteur, I believe, on the right to, amongst other things, sanitation, health sanitation, and safe drinking water. Okay, agua potable. Okay, now usually when I hear agua potable, I go for, I often say potable water, to be honest, just potable water, which is perfectly legitimate. However, since this rapporteur was actually called the rapporteur for safe drinking water, during this meeting I was referring to it as safe water, okay, safe drinking water. And anyway, he was talking in his intro about various environmental damage that's being done, various problems with pollution. And some of the wording was actually, some of it was pretty tricky, actually. It's not what you usually expect when you're talking about a political situation. This is more very technical environmental problems that this guy was talking about. And at one point, so he talks about, I remember he talked about humedales at one point, okay, which I was happy, I got that, okay, that's wetlands. And by the way, if you haven't done so already, yes, okay, if you haven't done so already, so the reason I knew humedales, and I was pleased I knew it, wetlands, you may remember, have you seen my episode? I did a 3-part episode on the Sustainable Development Goals, okay, all 17 of them. I did a 3-parter. It's not the most thrilling episode in the world, don't get me wrong, because we're just going through the vocab in the SDGs. But there's one SDG that's entirely devoted to the issue of ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. That's SDG 6, in which a lot of this sort of water-related vocabulary appears. Now, what I didn't get, I had to look it up in a big hurry, was he was talking about bosque de niebla y cabeceras fluviales. Okay, well, bosque de niebla is actually just what it sounds like. It's a cloud forest. What was harder though was cabeceras fluviales, which are headwaters. I struggled with that. I saw it just before the statement started, and I scribbled it down on my notes. And the first time he said it, I said waterheads, and then I went, okay, headwaters. So headwaters is basically the source, from what I understand, is the source of a river. Okay, the headwaters. Cabeceras fluviales. So just remember that, by the way. That could come in handy. And then, okay, coming back then to our UCMs that we mentioned before, actually, Universal Coercive Measures. One of the delegations, I think this was Cuba this time, again in the same sort of camp as the Venezuelans, Russia. They talked about how the West, I think the US specifically, utiliza los medidas coercitivas unilaterales, UCMs, para cercenar políticas de inclusión social. So he was basically saying how the West were using these sanctions to, now I didn't know the word, I didn't come across it before, I didn't have a text for this, cercenar. I got it from the context, okay, I made an educated guess. I said undermine policies of social inclusion. They're trying to, the Cuban was saying that we've got all these policies of social inclusion, but they come along, put these sanctions in, and well, they undermine them. I think it's, from what I gather, it's stronger than that. So I got a word reference, and for cercenar they give me amputate. What was that? Amputate, mutilate. Now in English, I don't know if we do amputate social policies, but perhaps to scupper our social policies, to sabotage our social policies. What do you think about those? If you've got a better idea, as always, if you've got a better idea, please do put it in the comments, okay? But those were the two sort of ideas that really came to me that seem to closely reflect the original. And then, okay, now we're moving to a different committee. I think we're now turning to the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the CERD. Incoar was the word. They were discussing They were drafting a report on one of the countries that had been up for review, and the expression that I think was incoar, that was the word, to commence. So to commence, to begin. It's quite a high register word. I think it's more than just empezar or abrir. It's more than that. It's like to commence, to begin. Or then I also saw another alternative for incoar una acción. It was, I think I saw incoar una acción judicial, to institute legal proceedings. I love that, to institute. Often, I think if I heard that, I'd put it to launch. I do launch. I do a lot of launching. Okay, I launch. But I think institute is just the perfect register to replicate that expression, to institute legal proceeding. That's a really nice high register legalese expression that in English that I think should help you greatly. Okay, same meeting then. And they were, as I said, they were drafting, and with the drafting, they always sort of get into these discussions, and should we be using shall or must, and little details, okay? And one of the delegates, I believe she's was she Panamanian? She was Panamanian, expressed her concerns that the work they were. She said that nos empantamos, okay? So again, I wasn't 100% certain, but I could tell from the way she was speaking, there was frustration with how slowly they were going. And I think I guessed it. I said, yeah, we're getting bogged down. And that is indeed what it means. Okay, empantanarse. I mean, I think literally it's to flood, to be flooded, okay? Empantano. Yeah, if you look up empantanar, it gives you to flood. But I think in the word, in English that you're looking for is we're getting bogged down here. Okay, so she expressed her concerns that they were getting bogged down. Moving to then same meeting, and then this might seem on the face of a very simple expression. You might say to me, "Come on, Roland, why everyone knows this expression?" Okay, ça n'a rien à voir. Okay, you're thinking that's so easy. That's so easy. Okay, it's easy if someone says, for example, ça n'a rien à voir avec ce sujet-là. It's got nothing to do with that subject, okay? What about they just go, ça n'a rien à voir? You can't just say that's got nothing to do with it. It's got nothing to do, that doesn't exist in English, does it? Okay? If they just say, ça n'a rien à voir, what do we say in English? Or what could we say in English? The idea that I had was that that's neither here nor there. Okay, what do you think? You like that? That's neither here nor there. So it's all very well ça n'a rien à voir when it carries on. Ça n'a rien à voir avec la situation de le pays. It's nothing to do with the situation in the country. But they just say ça n'a rien à voir. Okay, it's irrelevant, perhaps, but I quite like what I thought came up with. That's neither here nor there. Nice expression, right? Interesting word. Also, same again, the third again. Moroccan lady speaking, one of the Moroccan members, and the word and the expression she said was. They were talking about, I think, again, they were discussing a report, drafting a report, and they were talking about how the country had réceptionné certains articles de notre convention par le biais de les intégrer dans leur loi interne. Réceptionner sounds simple enough, but it's a bit strange, to be honest. I caught me off guard a little bit. I just, yeah, it has. I think I said it has received certain articles of conventional, so maybe, but better, like taken on board, okay, taken on board, or, I mean, the official English translation is to take delivery, it seems, for, like, receptions, again, quite a high register, quite an official way of saying to take delivery. And the funny thing was that the day before, I'd been I bought a bike. I bought a motorbike. Royal Enfield. Any Indians watching? Royal Enfield. I bought a motorbike. And I was trying to tell someone I'd taken delivery of my bike. And I just said, j'ai reçu. But I think it would have been better if I'd said, j'ai réceptionné le véhicule hier, perhaps. Réceptionné, to take delivery of. Next one, staying with French. Meeting of UNCTAD, UN Commission on Trade and Development. This was a meeting last week I was in, and it was actually chaired by a friend of mine. I tell you, that's bizarre. Does that ever happen to you? It's all very well seeing the interpreters, you know, but like when someone in the delegation or the chair is a guy you know, Bojan is his. Boy, he was chairing this meeting. My friend Bojan, Slovenian guy, really good guy. Hello, Bojan. He was chairing this meeting, and he asked the audience. It was like a round table or some sort of symposium, whatever. It was all about illicit financial flows, IFFs, by the way, if you ever happen to run into them, IFFs. And he was asked, everyone in the audience, I want you to give me one word to summarize your relationship to your association with the issue of illicit financial flows. And there was a guy, I think he was from Senegal, and he said, c'est un manque à gagner. Un obstacle. That's what he said, right? And he said, manque à gagner. And I was like, not certain. And then he said, un obstacle. And I went, it's obstacle. Forget the manque à gagner, right? I was just going to go with obstacle. It's an obstacle. All right. Then anyway, once he finished speaking, I looked it up, manque à gagner. Shortfall, right? So the point he was trying to get at was with these illicit financial flows. You know, he's in the government, and you know, people in the government, the authorities. You know, it's all money that's not going into the public purse that should have. Okay, that it's all been illegally. It's gone down illegal channels. A manque à gagner, shortfall. And then, funnily enough, the two speakers later, another guy. Two speakers later, again, this time from Mali, maybe. Again, he goes, oh, c'est le manque à gagner. And I went, oh, it's a shortfall. Awful. Very proud of myself. So, yeah, a manque à gagner. And I have heard that come up here and there. A manque à gagner. I think just a shortfall. Spanish. Back to Spanish quickly. I think we're back in the Human Rights Council, another meeting, and I think it was again one of our friends, either Venezuela or Cuba, and they were talking about how it's necessary to desterrar de la práctica de ese consejo los estándares dobles. Los dobles traseros, that's the word, double standards, dobles traseros. Anyway, desterrar de la práctica. Okay, and that's again an expression they use quite a bit whenever they're critical of something that of a practice in the council. Basically, we want to banish the practice. We want to eliminate, maybe just eliminate. Okay, desterrar de la práctica. Okay, banish from the practice of this council use of double standards. Again, in Spanish, I think again there was a report, just a one-worder here for you, but potentially important one-worder. They were talking about, I think it was in an African country, about a person working for an NGO who had been actually killed in the line of duty, as it were, and they talked about un cooperante italiana. Okay, un cooperante. So an aid worker. So that's a word I think I've come across before, so that's just a good like for like rendering. I think if you hear that, un cooperante, an aid worker. And now the next word, it's more like a concept actually. I think we're back now in the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and one of the complainants had when they bring a case to the committee, they have to prove that they've gone through all the procedures at a domestic level to try and win compensation or whatever it may be. It's called they need to prove that they've exhausted domestic resources. So if you're ever in the treaty bodies, that's a very important expression, by the way, exhaustion of internal or domestic resources. And the point was that the person had submitted documentary proof to show that he had gone through all the stages at an internal level before bringing the case to the committee. And so the idea was that he had all this documentation. There was a paper trail. It's just a useful word just to have in mind. That can sometimes you can just use it if they're talking about if he's submitting all the necessary documents to prove that he'd done this, that, and the other. I mean, all those documents. That's just basically that there's a paper trail. Okay. Switching to Russian, again, this was now, I think it was a Ukrainian NGO that came before, there was a working group, it's called the Working Group on Enforced Disappearance. They meet a couple of times a year, and they meet in private session. And so they had a Ukrainian NGO appearing via remotely during that meeting. And they were going through various cases that had been brought at an official level in Ukraine. They're talking about Paterpievshi, because they spoke Russian, a couple of the members of the NGO. So Paterpievshi, the injured party, all right? That's a very, in legalese, Russian legalese, that's a very good word very important word to recognize, the injured party. And they were also talking about how they had, there was podacha obvinительного акта. Now, this is the first time I came across this expression. This was, I remember it was about a year ago, actually. It was it was a country review, some Armenia, and he was talking about, there was an Armenian delegate talking about all these obvinительные акты. It's a very official sort of expression, right? And I thought to me that, I think, in English we might say the charges, okay, that had been brought, but really I think a very good expression that fits the right that's the right register. The bill of indictment. I looked that up in multitran.ru. The obvinительный act, the bill of indictment. Sounds a bit American, but I think it really captures the register very nicely. Okay. Again, one of the committees. I think we're back in the third, talking about how the committee could spend its money that it has, what little money it has. I think it may be that same Panamanian lady. She talked about cómo gastar los exiguos recursos que tenemos. Exiguos recursos. So, and I think the best solution here might be the meager resources, or the limited resources, perhaps. Limited resources could work. But I think a really nice word is I think in English we say the meager resources that we have. Scant resources as well, perhaps. We're getting close to the end now. So then there was a meeting, Human Rights Committee, a working group on communications. Again, going through these cases brought by individual persons. And one of the rights that's really highlighted in it's the Treaty on Civil and Political Rights is the right to housing. So the Human Rights Committee covers, not to be confused with the Human Rights Council, covers the civil and political rights. And one of the big things here is the right to housing. And for whatever reason, there is just a plethora, good word there, of cases that have been brought against Spain and Italy for allegedly denying people the right to housing. And so they had a delegation from Spain in, it was a very tough meeting, it was all in Spanish, explaining themselves, as it were. And one of the delegates, he kept on talking about the situation in Spain, el parque social. So this isn't like social parks. It's not the parks. They're not referring to just the parks with the playgrounds and things. It's talking about a housing. It's the housing stock. Okay, the amount of houses that there are to accommodate, if there's enough or not. Okay, el parque social. I thought that was a useful expression to know the housing stock. And if you're going to be talking about housing, one thing you should definitely be familiar with is the concept of desahucio. Have I pronounced it right? Desahucio, okay. Desahucio, evictions, okay. Eviction, they were talking about expulsiones as well. I don't know exactly what the difference is, but desahucio is an eviction. So make sure you know that word if you're going to be talking about anything to do with housing. Okay, quickly back to Russian. An expression that one of the delegates used. I can't remember what meeting it was now. This again might seem very simple in the face of it, but talked about taking wording from one agreement and putting it into another agreement, okay, into another or an updated agreement, whatever. And the idea of kopировать и вставить. Okay, copy-paste. Okay, that's what the delegate was effectively saying. We can можем копировать и вставить эту часть. Okay, so just to recognize it, okay, because I think it's always just good to know. You see, if I was asked to say that in Russian, I'd probably say делим copy-paste, but that's how they say it. Копировать и вставить. That is the Russian for copy-paste. Always good to know that. Maybe you want to look up that expression perhaps in your other languages. It's always, so that you can recognize, just to be on the safe side. And the final expression, final interesting word I learned this week was in a meeting on Friday. It was the UNECE. It was a meeting on unified railway law. Okay, URL, as it's called. Yeah. But the word, there was the French speaker, and she was talking about again, they're drafting a convention. In fact, they're drafting a convention on unified railway law to harmonise basically railway procedures throughout the Eurasian region. And the practice and there was a few times that in the convention they referred to a specific article from another convention or another contract. And she said that this practice of doing that was une procédure assez inusité. Okay, when I heard that, I wasn't too sure. I thought, ooh, and she used it a couple of times actually. I think I said unusual, which is more or less okay, but yeah, you look it up, it's rare to do that kind of thing. So I don't know if the use of the word, maybe a French speaker can tell me, inusité. I can't remember hearing it before. Is it quite a rare word? Anyway, so inusité means rare. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, that is all the new that I learned last week. I hope some of those words have been useful. I try and give you a bit of context so that you can really position the word. What the circumstances in which it's used. So hopefully, maybe you may run into these words. Hopefully yourself. If you do, by the way, if you run into these words in your own work in the next few weeks, and then you think, oh bloody hell, that's what that fool off the interpretation station was talking about. Well, do contact me. Do tell me in the comments. Say, oh Roland, that word you gave me. There's I was doing a housing meeting and I knew it was eviction. So all thanks to you. Well, if that happens, please do tell me about it. Okay, please do like. Please share and subscribe and obviously comment. And really, I think that's all for today. I think you've had enough of me, with my bling. Hope the new looks brought a bit of smile to you on this fine day. All that's left to be said then is that episode 192 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.